So the most recent episode of The Bad Batch has really hammered home the growing animosity between the clone troopers and the Empire that's seeking to replace them. So I figured today we could take a closer look at how this process of transitioning from the clones to the stormtroopers is going and the effect it might have on the clone troopers and the future of the relationship between the clone troopers and the Imperial government. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoy this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So this has been a growing theme within the Bad Batch, the transition between the Republic and the Empire, and the way it's affecting not just the galaxy as a whole, but the massive army of clone troopers that the Republic built during the Clone Wars. It is no surprise that the clone troopers aren't huge fans of the idea of being replaced by recruited soldiers, and that there actually is some growing animosity between the clone troopers and the Imperial government. And today we're going to take a closer look at why some of that animosity exists, and it's not quite as cut and dry as it looks. So let's just jump in with one of the most unusual facts. It seems like Imperial leadership has begun hiring an entire new generation of Imperial officers, many of whom have very different ideas of the value of the troops serving under their command, especially when it comes to clones. We saw a pretty bold-faced example of new Imperial leadership straight up telling the clones to their face that they're expendable. Now, the Empire had a very different view on their soldiers to begin with, viewing most of their stormtroopers as cannon fodder, but that seems to be particularly true for the clones, where you even factor in a little bit of prejudice against clone beings. You end up with Imperial leaders who are intentionally assigning clones to sort of menial and unfulfilling tasks, and Imperial leaders who openly disdain for the clone troopers even after everything that they did for the Republic during the war. Now, it's understandable that a lot of clone troopers may see the situation and feel like, hey, we put our lives on the line for the Republic, and this is how the successor state to the Republic is treating us, and may have some very complex feelings about the Empire. Add to that the fact that the clone troopers are actively being replaced, seeing more and more TK troopers, a predecessor to the stormtrooper, present within Imperial military operations. The clone troopers are literally watching themselves be replaced, and they watch the government go through a pointless debate as to what to do with them following the end of the war, and how they should be compensated, a debate that ultimately led nowhere and is going to leave the clone troopers in a pretty rough spot, basically cut loose with no resources to support themselves and little work to be done, and that's if they're allowed to survive following the end of their usefulness at all. Add to that, as we see during the events of the most recent episode of The Bad Batch, the clone troopers are put on increasingly riskier missions and thrown into positions where they're more likely to be killed in combat, and this may actually be a conscious choice by Imperial leadership as a way to sort of move on their replacement process. So how exactly does this manifest, though? I mean, we've talked about why the clones may feel this way, but how exactly does that affect their actions? So, as we've seen in The Bad Batch, a lot of them are less than enthusiastic to support the Imperial cause, and that's the best case scenario for the Empire. In some more extreme cases, and I'm sure we'll still see this at some point, we'll start to see clone uprisings, some of the last units of clone troopers still serving in the Imperial military actively standing up against the Empire as they see their usefulness waning and question what their future is going to look like under this new government, especially when this government came in and sort of aggressively replaced the government that seemed to support and cherish them during the war. But that brings me to the real sad thing about all of this. Well, we could look at Palpatine and the Imperial officers as a new guard coming in to replace the old guard. When we look at the politicians that are making a lot of the decisions in relation to this, the politicians in the Imperial Senate, for example, we can realize that a lot of them are the same people that were serving in the Republic Senate. The same people that were part of the government that created the clone troopers and seemed to really care about them during the war. And yet, with the war over, they haven't done much to help the clones, aside from a few senators who stood up on their behalf. So, the truth of this is that it appears like the senators in the Galactic Republic really only cared about the clones when they were useful to the ongoing war effort. And the moment the war was over, and the clones were unnecessary, they were dead weight that needed to be cut. And they weren't soldiers who had given everything for the Republic, but just another tool of war that had outserved its usefulness. while it may be comforting as viewers to view this sort of anti-clone mentality as something unique to the Galactic Empire, and something that the Republic that we saw in the Clone Wars would have never done, I think the truth is a lot of the people of the Republic and the politicians of the Republic would have turned on the clones just the same were the war to have ended with a Republic victory instead of an Imperial victory. All in all, this has been a pretty big theme within the Bad Batch, the transition from the days of the Galactic Republic to the days of the Galactic Empire, and the sort of rocky path it's been through that era. And a lot of changes occurred, not just those that we see with the clone troopers. And, well, we've talked a lot about the transitions that happened with the Republic in this video, and there's a lot going on with the Separatist side of things, too. And if you'd like to learn a little bit about Separatist holdouts, I'll leave a link up here to a video on that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think a clone uprising is basically inevitable at this point. Do you think the Empire will be able to keep the clones under sort of a strict control until they can sort of tuck them away somewhere? Or do you think eventually the clones are going to try to stage a coup or rebellion against the Imperial government? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, you could leave that down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.